Hello, my friends. Before the show starts, I wanted to take a moment to ask you, the listener, for a little bit of help this holiday season. My dogs, Henwolf and Chicano, have both developed serious health problems, all at once and all around Christmas, and I could use a little bit of help making sure I can take care of their bills. So if you want to find out how you might be able to help out, just go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Help My Dogs. Thank you again, and now let's get on with the show. The holidays are a time of family, fun, and food. But for one family in West Virginia, things went very, very wrong. On Christmas Eve, 5 children from one family went missing without a trace. Where did they go? And what happened to them?
What you are about to hear is believed to be real, based on witness accounts, testimonies, and public record. This is terrifying and true.
When it comes to the Christmas season, I go all out. I wear a Santa hat pretty much every day in December. I'm always smiling even when I'm stuck in the post office in a long line that never seems to move. I'm that annoying Pollyanna who gets so excited to share some cheer and look at some lights. But tonight's story is about possibly the worst Christmas I've ever heard of outside of a war or terrible famine. It's dark, it's sad, and it's so full of twists and turns, you're going to have to watch out or you might just get whiplash. The story of the Sodder children and their Christmas Eve, right after these words from our sponsors. The Sodder family disappearance. In 1945, the night before Christmas, Fayetteville, West Virginia witnessed a very strange event that led to the disappearance of 5 children from one family. George and Jenny Sodder, parents of the Sodder family, were both fast asleep in their house, along with 9 of their children, when a deadly fire broke out at their home. Jenny Sodder, the mother, took 4 of her children and managed to escape the fire, leaving behind George and the rest of the children at the mercy of the hungry flames. The children left behind were Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5. The 5 of them shared 2 bedrooms upstairs in the house. Eventually, George Sodder, the father, broke back into the family home in hopes of saving his remaining children. And here is when things start getting really suspicious. Firstly, George decided to fetch the ladder placed outside the house so that he could use it to climb his way upstairs, but it was nowhere to be found. The thing about this ladder was that it was always placed in the same exact location and disappeared very unexpectedly. This is one factor pointing to the possibility that the fire was not an accident. Was it deliberately done, and did the criminal try to wipe out any means of escape? As if this wasn't enough, to George's dismay, both of his coal trucks were surprisingly not starting either. When the family couldn't manage things themselves, one of the children who had managed to escape called the fire operator to ask for help, but they did not receive any response. Some of the neighbors tried doing the same, but the fire operators would simply not pick up the call. As things started escalating, a concerned neighbor traveled to town and personally contacted the fire chief, F.J. Morris, urging him to send in assistance. But despite the efforts, the fire department, which was located only 2.5 miles away from the Sodders' home, did not reach them until 7 hours later. This in and of itself is extremely bizarre. And of course, by the time they finally arrived, the house was in literal ashes. Is this simply the consequence of hiring extremely incompetent staff? A fatal consequence of procrastination and laziness? Or something more complex? To me, all of this sounds a little systematic and planned. Or maybe the Sodders just had tough luck that Christmas Eve night, with every wrong thing happening as a mere cold coincidence. When the authorities finally arrived at the burned down house, they searched up and down for the remaining bodies, but they were nowhere to be found. All the missing children were presumed dead, and the fire chief reported that the burn was so intense that it cremated their bodies, including their bones. Regardless of how difficult this information might be to absorb, for the majority of us, it does sound convincing enough. But is it really? People were quick to point out that even if the children's flesh was entirely burned away, the bones would have typically been left behind. Furthermore, there was no smell reported of burning flesh on the scene. Later on, the investigation showed that the house had bad wiring, which had started the fire, and death certificates were issued for the 5 dead Sodder children. However, soon after this event, George and his wife started to suspect that there was something horribly wrong, and that their children weren't dead, but had been kidnapped. The fire that was set was merely to divert the parents' and neighbors' attention. George even informed authorities that he had the wiring of the house checked by a reliable power company just a few days before the incident. Now, before we dig further into this whole kidnapping theory, let's talk a little about George Sodder so that we can have fuller context. George Sodder had immigrated all the way from Italy and lived in an Italian immigrant community. Sodder was an active member of this community and was particularly vocal in heated debates regarding Italy's government. The fact that he never really revealed the reason for leaving his native country also sparks curiosity. Some have speculated that George was involved in suspicious activities there, and this is the reason behind the kidnapping of George's children. Now things get a little more interesting. A few days before the fire, a life insurance salesman approached George to offer his services, but he wasn't very successful at it. For whatever reason, George wasn't interested in what the salesman had to offer, and the exchange of conversation that followed wasn't exactly sweet. The salesman got extremely infuriated, completely losing his calm, and began yelling at George. The salesman then said, and I'm quoting, "Your goddamn house is going up in smoke and your children are going to be destroyed. You're going to pay for your dirty remarks about Mussolini." This report of events seemed pretty damning. I mean, there we have a culprit. Whatever he had said fits in exactly with the fire incident at the Sodders' house. But there's so much more coming, which means we shouldn't necessarily jump to the simplest of conclusions just yet. In the days leading up to the event, one of the Sodder children reported that they had witnessed a man watching the kids come home from school. Another suspicious occurrence took place at around 12:30 a.m. on Christmas Eve. The family received a call, and Jenny went up to receive it. There was nothing suspicious about the call itself, but this minor event is important because it led to a major observation. All the lights in the family home were on downstairs. After getting done with the phone call, she returned to her bed to sleep, and this is when Jenny heard a loud bang on the roof, followed by the sound of something rolling, and shortly afterward, she woke up to the smell of smoke. It's important to note that Jenny reported that the lights were on in the house, which puts into question the entire theory of the fire being caused by a faulty power system. If there really was a problem with the wiring in the house, how could the lights be on? The Sodders also reported that even when the house was burning, the lights were still on. Furthermore, a witness to the entire incident reported seeing a man with a tool that is typically used to remove engines from cars. This could perhaps explain why both of the Sodders' trucks weren't working. Then there was another clue. At the memorial that George set up for his missing children, Sylvia Sodder found a hard rubber object in the yard of the house, which Jenny believed may have caused the loud noise that woke her up the night of Christmas Eve. George, the father, took particular interest in the rubber object and, on detailed examination, found out that it was napalm, what's known as a pineapple bomb on the battlefield. All of these strange occurrences do combine to make one thing somewhat clear. This fire was no accident, and definitely not a consequence of poor wiring. And after all these small clues, the Sodders, too, were pretty convinced of this as well. And so they continued working and investigating in hopes that one day they would receive the answers that they've been looking for ever since the night of the tragic incident. In pursuit of finding the truth, Jenny even burnt several animal bones, only to find that each time the bones left remains behind. She spoke to a crematorium employee, too, who told her that bones are left behind even after a body burns at 200 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours. The Sodders' house was on fire for only 45 minutes, so how is it even possible that the bones did not leave behind any trace? Another noteworthy thing to consider here is that the family also found the remains of appliances in the rubble. In short, if the children were in fact burned, there should have been some bones or evidence of some sort left behind. As if all of this was not twisted enough, there have also been reports of sightings of the children who the police had pronounced dead and had quite literally issued certificates for. The first sighting occurred on the night of the event when a woman reported that she had seen the children in a car while the fire was still occurring. Then, a woman who runs a tourist shop informed police that she saw the children the morning after the fire. Quote, "I served them breakfast. There was a car with Florida license plates at the tourist court, too," she explains. Then, at a hotel located in Charleston, which is quite near Fayetteville, another woman told police that she had seen the children. Quote, "The children were accompanied by 2 men and 2 women, all of Italian extraction. I do not remember the exact date. I tried to talk to the children in a friendly manner, but the men appeared hostile and refused to allow me to talk to them. I sensed that I was being frozen out, and so I said nothing more. They left early the next morning." 2 years later, in 1947, George and Jenny attempted to contact the FBI in hopes that they would help them find more leads. The FBI eagerly offered assistance, but in an unexpected turn of events, both the police and fire departments refused to assist the FBI. This sounds a bit shady, don't you think? The idea that the fire department could be so busy that they would not even have time to give a couple of interviews here and there to the federal police seems especially suspicious. Proceeding further, the couple then hired a private investigator, C.C. Tinsley. As Tinsley put his detective skills to work, he found that one of the members of the coroner's jury, who was involved in announcing the fire as an accident, was the same life insurance person who had quite literally threatened to destroy the entire family. The twists, they just keep on coming. Then rumors started to spread about there being some remains of the children's bodies, and guess who took the initiative? The fire chief, F.J. Morris. This man told people that he had seen a heart in the ashes of the Sodder home, picked it up, hidden it in a box, and buried it in their home. Tinsley, the private investigator, somehow convinced the fire minister to dig up the area in which he had kept the box containing the heart, only to find out it was just beef liver and had never been exposed to fire. Refusing to show any signs of giving up, the Sodders then hired a pathologist who found 4 shards of human vertebrae in the remains of the house and sent them out for analysis. Investigation revealed that the bones looked like they belonged to a 16 or 17-year-old child. But the oldest Sodder child who had gone missing was Maurice, age 14. The bones also showed no signs of having been exposed to fire, so it was not probable that the bones were the remains of the Sodder children. Shortly afterward, a hearing was called in Charleston, West Virginia, and the Sodder parents were told that their case was hopeless and would be closed. Despite this, the parents continued to spread awareness about their missing children, accusing authorities of lying to them and increasing their suffering. In the years that followed, the family received a few leads from people here and there, but all efforts remained hopeless. Nevertheless, both the Sodder parents spent their entire lives searching for their children, but after their deaths, their cause slowly died with them. What actually happened to the Sodder children that cold West Virginia night on Christmas Eve is still a mystery to this day. I tell you, this one, it's a thinker. I can't get it out of my mind ever since we started discussing it. Some of the leads seem promising, like the insurance salesman, but then there are other things like the idea that they may have been involved in some kind of organized crime or something along those lines that to me just smacks of anti-Italian immigrant rhetoric, which was pretty common at the time. But what do you think out there? Do you think something truly mysterious and strange happened to the Sodder children, or do you think this is simply a case of parents being unable to accept the truth of their incredibly, unbelievably tragic loss? All I know is I'm going to hold my loved ones very, very tight to me this Christmas, and I recommend you do the same. If you're enjoying Terrifying and True and everything we do here at Weekly Spooky, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcasting app. It really does make a huge difference, and I appreciate it a whole lot. And if you want to do a little something for me this holiday season, go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Help My Dogs and contribute any amount toward my beloved pets mounting medical bills. I really do appreciate it, and thank you so much for listening. Terrifying and True is narrated by Henrik Kuto, executive produced by Rob Fields, and produced by Dan Wilder. The original theme song is composed and performed by Ray Mattis. All other music is from Audio Blocks. A huge thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their names on the show. And they are Kelly Oram, Julia Kirsch, Christopher Sullivan, Brent McCullough, Gino Lyons, Steve King, Karen Ouimet, Jack Kerr, Jeff and George Hilton, Craig Cohen, and Kevin Fry. Thank you all so much. And if you want to join them in supporting the program, just go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can help us keep going and going and going, and you'll get bonus episodes as well. And if you have a story you'd like us to cover, send us an email at weeklyspooky@gmail.com.